Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to another personal monologue on We Can Fight Like Cats If We Have to. My name is Sally Davis, and I'm hurting. I'm really, really hurting. Many don't know my story. My story has several stories within that story. My story has several stories within that story, and all of them are excruciatingly painful. And all of them have a similar topic. And it's a topic where they really nab minorities. There's the question commonly asked of, is there discrimination in New Brunswick? Not only is there discrimination in New Brunswick, but there is constant cover-up of systematic discrimination and violence in New Brunswick. Not only within the systems, but also within the private organizations that run many of the services in New Brunswick. These private organizations get to do as they please because the laws protect them from any accountability and harm. We'll call this chapter 1 of Saly's story. Chapter 1 involves the Catholic Church. And I know what the listeners are thinking. Well, Saly, you were Muslim. What does the Catholic Church have to do with you? Well, the Catholic Church ran a business that profited both the Catholic Church and l'Université de Moncton for many years, and it was called Notre-Dame d'Acadie Music Conservatory. In this music conservatory, children of all ages could go and learn to play an instrument or sing. I became a student of Notre-Dame d'Acadie in grade 2. For the parents listening, to put that into perspective, I was 7 years old. I attended Notre-Dame d'Acadie until a violent incident occurred in front of my parents when I was approximately 12 years old. That's almost 5 years for those who would like some help with the math. I was a music student. I was learning the piano. And I was in class with 3 other individuals, 3 other pupils. René Beaulieu, who is a sweetheart, whom I've recently spoken to about this. Annabelle Godet, who is always my duet partner. And Aurèle Lavigne-Robichaud, who was the daughter of, I believe, my father's superior. He was the director of the University of Moncton at the time. The 4 of us attended our class together. 1 hour a week, every week, for 5 years. Our teacher was Sœur Rose-Aimée Cormier, I believe her last name was. Maybe it wasn't Cormier. Whatever it was, her name was Sœur Rose-Aimée. Maybe it was Galland or Godet, or who knows. If I see it and I read it, I'll know it's her. Not to be confused with Sœur Rose-May. Sœur Rose-May was a different teacher. I'm speaking of Sœur Rose-Aimée. which hilariously, aimer means loved or beloved or love. I was a Muslim, Middle Eastern, North African girl in an Acadian Catholic music organization that profited the church and l'Université de Moncton. For those unaware, my father was an employee at l'Université de Moncton. He was a professor there. The school was highly recommended and highly seen as the best conservatory in town at the time. In my classroom of 4, I was the only non-Acadian, non-Catholic descent. And that was probably the beginning of my problems. You see, while other children at 7 years old are learning to be loved and self-love and learning self-esteem, learning self-worth, I was dealing with multiple assaults on different levels within the school system and within Notre Dame d'Acadie. I don't remember if it started right away with the hitting, but I do remember it started right away pretty much with the just bitterness attitude. She was nice the first few sessions, but something seemed off. I didn't like nor trust her. She seemed agitated. It wasn't long until agitation progressed to verbal assaults, insults, where only I was called names. Stupid, filthy animal, useless, among many things. So many insults. I don't even really remember them all. But do you know what I cannot forget? Many of you know I've had my hair set on fire because I've mentioned it in my previous podcasts. Students did that to me in school. But what many don't realize is I've also had my hair ripped out of my scalp, pulled. I've been thrown around using my hair, shoved around using my hair by Sir Rosimi. She often called me useless. And I used to practice, I used to practice, and my parents made sure that I would practice, and I always practiced. And I wonder if part of me, I hated the piano. I hated the piano so much because it reminded me of her every time I touched the keys. But I wonder if I also practiced for fear of what she could do if I did something else wrong. You see, Sir Rosime would also smash the piano cover for the keys on my fingers. She would smack me upside the head. She'd shove me into a closet. I also got the standard thing like rulers on the fingers and slapped on the hands, but none of my colleagues got that. Not Renee, not Aurel, not Annabelle. And if you ask Annabelle today what she thinks of Sir Rosime, she would tell you that she loved Sir Rosime. And there's a very good reason for that, my friends. You see, Annabelle was always my duet partner. And I don't know if Annabelle practiced or not, but Annabelle sucked at memorizing the stuff we had to do for our recitals and our competitions. And because she was my duet partner, and because she would screw up, even if I played my part all the way through, I used to ignore Annabelle completely when she would screw up, and I would just put it in my head of play until you're done, and then you're done, and don't miss a note, and pray that she doesn't beat the shit out of you. Alas, Annabelle would fuck up. Annabelle would forget her notes. And I got Annabelle's beatings and insults, while Annabelle got a present to congratulate her. I remember looking through the closet at the girls receiving presents on holidays while I'm getting a punishment. One hour, 1 week for 1 year. 52 hours a year I spent at the hands of this woman. But the abuse she didn't end there. Every time I touched the keyboards, I could hear her voice. I could feel her slaps. I could feel my hair getting pulled. Every single time. Eventually, as a child, it became too much. I didn't know how to handle the fear and terror and emotion. I used to hate that my father taught me never to cry, but sometimes I wonder if he taught me never to cry because he knew that maybe it'll keep me alive. You see, because abusers don't show mercy when you show a reaction. It gets them off, so they beat you more. And I wonder if my father's advice spared me from really potentially getting murdered. Look at all these Indigenous bodies they're finding. At one point when I would practice the piano, if I made a mistake when I was practicing, I would lose it. I would fully and thoroughly lose it. I would start to smash my hands into the piano. I would punch it so hard my knuckles would swell and bruise and bleed. And it wasn't enough to get the stress out. So I would start to bang my head into the piano. And little did I know that in the church, they attack the head because it doesn't leave a mark. My Indigenous brothers and sisters who survived the church taught me that one in their testimonies of survival. It's hard to talk about this. I feel physically sick. And I don't know what part of me stops me from crying. But I want to, just like I did when I was a kid. Maybe it's that same fear that stops me from crying. Maybe it's the fact that I'm still afraid she's going to kill me. I dream about being in that closet. I don't like people touching my hair. I'm afraid of people touching my hair. Here I am, a 37-year-old woman. 30 years after the abuse began. And I'm discovering how the system gets us. How the system violates people of color. You see, very seldomly are people who are Caucasian descent abused by people who do not have authority on them. And I mean physical and psychological abuse. They can be sexually assaulted a lot more frequently than physically assaulted. And if they are physically assaulted, not enough of you white people have come forward because the statute of limitation on physical abuse of a child and psychological abuse of a child is 2 years, but sexual abuse of a child is indefinite. And I'm wondering what the financial statistics are of white victims of sexual abuse versus non-white victims of sexual abuse by the same priest, teacher, insert here, person. I wonder if it's relatively the same. I wonder if they do a group thing. And I wonder if the church gets away with not paying if it's white victims. Now, why is the statute of limitation so important? You see, this statute of limitation is not only applicable within the legal and criminal code, it's also applicable within the human rights code. Go to the Human Rights Commission, they say. Yeah, you might get a settlement. But legally, what you could get, and criminally, what you could get, if this person is found guilty in a court of a Queen's bench, is about 2 extra zeros. Minimum more than what the Human Rights Commission could ever get you in mediation. But to go to court's Queen bench and have a case on a case where you would have a statute of limitation on 2 years, you depend on the mediation at Human Rights Commission. So an admission of guilt at the Human Rights Commission. It's necessary. It's a necessity to go to court civilly against the church. But you see, if the church settles with you in the Human Rights Commission for the negative 2 zeros, you're made to sign a contract that says that they have resolved the matter and you can no longer pursue them outside of the already paid resolution. And likely you'll only get $5,000 or $8,000. Whereas in a courtroom and a criminal system, it would give you millions. I think that fly wanted to give us some comedic relief. So if you heard a fly, listeners, there was a fly near my microphone. You're welcome. Thank you, fly. And many people will argue that sexual abuse is much more terrible than physical abuse when you're a child. I beg to differ because I have experienced both. Do you know why? Sexual abuse is usually from a person that I know I can avoid and keep my child away from. Sexual abuse may happen once, may happen twice, may happen 3 times, but we have accepted as a society that it is not okay. And therefore, the victim is treated with compassion. And personally, as a victim of both, I was able to process through the sexual abuse. Because sexual abuse only really affects you, I think, in my case anyway, the next time you are in a physical relationship with someone. Or if you ever get sexually assaulted again. But the problem with physical abuse is oftentimes you don't see it coming, especially when that physical abuse is from someone in an organization where you've witnessed the organization cover it up and you know that you are not safe if nobody stops it from happening. In most sexual abuse cases, there is nobody there to stop it from happening. There's even less likely to be witnesses. But in a physical and psychological abuse, in my case anyway, all those nuns witnessed it. Those students witnessed it. And I honestly wonder if some of the parents witnessed it and just never said anything. And it wasn't always predictable. I could be walking into the classroom and have my hair ripped out of my head for no reason other than it's Monday. For years, I struggled with anxiety and depression, and I couldn't put my finger on what the hell I was afraid of. And then I realized I was afraid of everyone. Because abusing a child is okay. Abusing a child is acceptable. This is what the criminal and legal code has done. It has made it acceptable to abuse a child to a point where this child has difficulty going out in public, to the point where this child has an anxiety attack as an adult when they are going through a space and they know humans might be behind them and they don't know what's going to happen from behind. Hell, they don't even know what's going to come from in front of them. sexual abuse. I just need to make sure I'm not in a room by myself with a man. In my case, anyway. As a child, I figured that out. I knew that I could protect myself. But physical abuse, there were witnesses that said nothing. There were witnesses that told my father to calm down when he finally saw her put her hands on me. They told him not to ruin her career, not to cause a problem. And here I am in a situation where history could repeat itself. I have children of my own now, going into a system that I have to trust with them, with their lives, with their sanity. And I'm a stronger, smarter, more ballsy parent than unfortunately my poor parents were when they were told to stifle themselves because they were a visible minority. They were told they would not be believed. And so they did not report it to the police. In my father's case, his job was blackmailed. L'Université de Moncton had a hand in the blackmail of my father. I don't care if L'Université de Moncton did it in or out of a boardroom or publicly or privately or wanted to cover it up or just had a bunch of people that they knew had a problem going on running this organization that was abusing the children of their employees, and that the staff would threaten parents who want to come forward. But UDM, you are also responsible for this. And here we are, 37 years old. My statute of limitation ran at the age of 20. It ran out. When I still couldn't even find the psychological help necessary to even identify why I freak out about everything. Why I don't trust people, why I don't like being touched. Why I can't really not work or have a job. Why I've gone from absolutely curious about every new person I meet to absolutely terrified of strangers in a grocery store. Because the statute of limitation on child abuse is 2 years. That's why legally, survivors of the residential schools or the day schools might not get away with getting back much. Because it is legal to hurt a child if the child doesn't figure out what's happened until they're older. until they struggle to raise their kids, until they're such a perfectionist that the smallest mistake makes them lose their mind, until they can go weeks or months without a proper night's sleep, until they look at their own children and know the monsters that could hurt them and be able to do absolutely nothing about it. This tax-free charitable organization has taken away so much from me. And all I'm likely to get out of them is maybe as much as a measly $10,000. That doesn't compensate for all the therapy I've had to have already. And it's sure as hell not going to compensate for the therapy coming up. Doesn't compensate for my self-hatred when I touch my own hair. Doesn't compensate for my inability to pay attention and focus on tasks without a fear for my life. I'm a brave, badass woman, not because I want to be, but because I have no other choice. Because we live in a system that believes our children, the children of people of color or religious minorities, are disposable casualties, and we don't give a damn enough to uprise against these stupid, white privileged, white supremacist laws and statutes of limitation. I can't talk anymore. My eyes burn because they want to cry, and I can't cry. My throat hurts from the passion and the years of purging because I hated myself so much. I just made myself throw up because at least I could control that. My body aches and my brain hurts because I don't sleep at night. And I profoundly, fundamentally hate myself for not being able to focus and do normal things and be a normal person. And the most compensation I'm likely to get for that is $10,000 and be forced to sign an NDA. This isn't right. This is not right. Parents, if it could happen to me, it can happen to your child. Even if they're white, it could happen because they don't like how pretty your child is. They don't like their hair, or they just feel that your child is small and appropriate to pick on. So even though you can't relate to me on a religion or visible minority status, maybe you can relate to me as a parent. And question yourself on if this is the world you want to raise your children in, with laws that do absolutely nothing to protect them from the horrific secrets that are burdened upon their soul. If you stayed till the end of this and survived this story, thank you for listening. The only people who can change the place we live in is ourselves. And I'm so tired of being met with silence. Be kind to each other. Support one another. But most important of all, stand up for each other. Have a good day.